Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to be talking about the two most popular Mythic Plus healers in Season 3. We're going to be talking about the differences between Resto Shaman and Resto Druid, why are they so popular, why are they considered to be so strong, and I personally geared up both of these healers to try and make this video. Now keep in mind, I've been playing a lot of Resto Shaman, specifically Farseer Resto Shaman in Mythic Plus content, and I've been having an amazing time with it. I think it is a very strong healer. I think it is very meta right now as well. A lot of people are picking this up. And recently, I've been gearing up my Resto Druid because I can see a surge in Resto Druid popularity, and I really wanted to compare both of them. At the time I'm making this video, my Resto Shaman was around 714 item level. My Resto Druid was around 710 item level. So there is an item level difference. My Shaman also had better trinkets than my Druid. So that is something to keep in mind. But I want to talk about the good, the bad, and the differences between them. So first of all, the meta. We have to talk about how things are changing. And again, anything can happen if there's going to be further balance changing, because a lot of the times the healer that fits into that meta spot might be the healer that provides the important raid buff or utility or bloodlust or whatever. So keep that in mind. Right now you can see here, this is the war within Season 3 in terms of how the popularity of healers emerged throughout the following weeks. You can see here Resto Shaman was by far the most popular healer for a long time, and in the last couple of weeks Resto Druid has been climbing. Now keep in mind, this week right here is not finished. We're halfway through the week, so this is going to change. But if we click into the last week, you can see that Resto Shaman and Resto Druid are both taking up a huge slice of these really high plus 18 keys. So why is that? Why are they being chosen over all the other healers? And this is where we're going to start off Restoration Shaman. Now, Farseer is the most popular build right now. There's multiple advantages for it. The mana economy is really good. The burst healing. The Farseer is going to be the way that you're going to be playing if you're doing the highest keys in the world. Now, if you've been playing Resto Shaman, if you've been playing Farseer Resto Shaman, you're fully aware of the healing that you can do. I think the healing is very strong. A lot of people are running that Deluge flow of the tides build, which means that you want to maintain riptides on people, and then if there's AoE damage happening, you might be pressing your chain heal on a person that has riptide on them. You also have an insanely powerful burst healing ability through Ancestral Swiftness, because Ancestral Swiftness works with your tier set, and you have a bunch of healing if you need to do it. Ancestral Swiftness is very short cooldown as well. And then on top of that, you can also manage your things like Cloudburst Totem, and there's a lot of good things with Farseer Resto Shaman. You also have to remember, a lot of Resto Shamans might be speccing into healing rate, but they won't be using it. It's mainly due to the pathing in order to pick up Deluge, which actually frees up your rotation and makes it better, in my honest opinion. In terms of playing Farseer, optimizing your ancestors is going to be very, very important, and I think it is a very different gameplay to Totemic and something new and fresh, at least in my personal opinion. So Resto Shaman has really good healing. It's not the absolute top tier healing, and we'll talk about that later on, but really strong healing. You have really strong utility. You have to look at things like Interrupt. You have a really good Interrupt as a Shaman. You have a knock up into a stun combo that is very popular out there. You knock up mobs and then you use a Cap Totem, which again is used often depending on the situation. You have things to speed up your group members, to slow down enemies. You have Poison Cleansing Totem, which is actually pretty good in Arakara, but outside of that, it's somewhat questionable. You do have Purge. The big things that you really want to talk about as Resto Shaman right now is Bloodlust. Bloodlust, especially in some of these melee-heavy comms, is relatively hard to come by. So if your group is missing Bloodlust, or especially if your group is missing some of the raid buffs, for example, Resto Shaman provides Sky Fury, you're bringing Sky Fury and potentially Bloodlust to your group, which are going to be very, very valuable. So now you have a Resto Shaman who has really good healing, and it also provides some of the strongest buffs in Mythic Plus content, which means that depending on the group composition, Resto Shaman is going to fit in there very, very nicely. And on top of that, it's very important to mention the Resto Shaman has Ancestral Vigor, which is going to increase players' HP, and that is going to be very important depending on which key you're doing or how high of a key you're doing, because there are certain bosses and trash packs and things like that where there's going to be a huge amount of damage happening in the next couple of seconds. You need to keep everyone topped up, but also you want to keep Ancestral Vigor buff up in order to prevent some of the one-shots. But hey, what about Resto Druids who are climbing in ranks every single week, especially when you look at some of the highest keys done? And again, if you're looking at the pure HPS, I think Restoration Druid, or specifically Wildstalker Resto Druid, is the king of pure healing when it comes to Mythic Plus content. Again, We did a bunch of testing on PTR. There was a bug with rampant growth. That bug was fixed and Blizzard kind of gave compensation buffs. And if you get your tier set bonus, and if you're looking for a healer that is going to brute force any healing checks out there, Resto Druid is the absolute king. But that does not mean Resto Druid is going to be a perfect healer for many people out there, because in my opinion, Resto Druid requires a lot of setup times. Again, you are a hot healer. You want to, for example, if you're doing Floodgate and you're doing Big Mama and the intermission phase is starting and you don't have any hots on people, you're gonna have a bad time. This is where trinkets like Living Silk, having this trinket is going to be as close to mandatory as possible for any Mythiclus pusher out there, because it can really help you with some of the mistakes that you do or if you get caught out. Resto Druid is a healer that requires setup time. You need to maintain hots on people, and then you can get a lot of value out of your regrowths. A lot of people might find it extremely intensive to play. I personally think Resto Druid is very intensive to play. Both of these healers, in terms of Resto Shaman and Resto Druid, they both enjoy haste, but I feel like Resto Druid requires a little bit of more knowledge. If you have no idea about when damage is about to happen, you're going to have a bad time as Resto Druid. There are tools to help with that. You can use things like Convoke, you have Nature Swiftness and all that, but in order to optimize everything around Resto Druid, you need to know the damage patterns, which is, again, not a deal breaker if you've been playing a lot of these Mythiclus dungeons. If you know how to play Resto Druid, you are fully aware of what I'm saying right now. An absolute juicer when it comes to that HPS. If you're doing Dawnbreaker, there's a lot of single target requirements of Dawnbreaker. Resto Druid maintaining hots on a person that has dots and then spamming or using regrowths, you're gonna have no issues keeping people alive. For example, doing something like Swamp Phase in Floodgate, the absolute king of sustained AoE healing, Resto Druid is gonna have no issues whatsoever. You're already starting to see in some of these highest groups that you might have healers or players who will have Resto Druid and Resto Shaman ready to go. They might use Resto Shaman for certain keys, and they might use Resto Druid for those really intensive healing keys. What about Resto Druid utility compared to Resto Shaman? Well, Resto Druid provides a lot of utility. If you look at raid buffs, you're looking at Mark of the Wild, a very strong raid buff that a lot of groups will want to pick up. You had this issue in previous season where that buff might be coming down from something like Balance Druids because they were really strong, and therefore they pushed out Resto Druids. This season is a little bit different, and one of the best sources of Mark of the Wild is actually from Resto Druid, which is why Resto Druid has been climbing. You do have Battle Res and things like that, but again, I don't rate Battle Res as good as Bloodlust, depending on the composition, because you can pick up things like jumper cables from Auction House. You can get drums for Bloodlust, but it just feels really bad using those. In terms of other things that Druid provides, you have things like Ursol's Vortex that can be combined into Ursol's, into Typhoon, providing a pseudo stop. You have In-Cap Roar as well as another stop. You have an interrupt. Now, keep in mind, I don't rate Druid's interrupt as good as a Resto Shaman's interrupt, because keep in mind, Druid's interrupt is going to charge the mob, and there's plenty of times where your positioning might be a little bit off and you're like, I can't interrupt this guy because there's a bomb in the way, and if I charge, I will die. This can happen, but it can be fixed with better position. And of course, as a Druid, you have access to Soothe, you have Speed Boost, you can dispel Poison, you can dispel Curses. A lot of the utility is shared among these two healers. So actually, at the end of the day, Resto Druid stands on its own in terms of what it can provide right now. And the difference between them is going to be, what does your group need? If you already have Mark of the Wild, you might want to pick up a Resto Shaman buff. You might need Bloodlust. If you already have Shaman, in a lot of examples you might have Elemental Shaman, you might want to pick up something like Resto Druid. So there is a lot of this, can this healer fit into the comp that I'm running right now? Just a quick overview in terms of healer DPS. Again, this is looking at real play information right now, and a lot of people are living in the past because it is very clear the Blizzard stance on healer DPS. This expansion has been very, very strict. Healer DPS is far less impactful than it was in previous expansions. You can see here some of the top runs, again, and some of the meta healers right now. Resto Shaman doing like 1.4, Resto Druid doing 1.1 million. You might look at these numbers and you compare to the rest of the group's contribution in terms of tank doing 4 to 5 million, a DPS doing something like 10 million DPS. Your damage contribution as a healer is tiny percentage. If you let a DPS die because they were not topped up and you went into your kitty form as a Wildstalker Resto Druid, that's it. You are trolling your group. In this expansion, you're far better off keeping everyone super safe, and then if you have time, go and contribute damage. Now, as a wild stalker Resto Druid, a lot of people are put off by the amount of min-maxing you can do in terms of cat weaving. It can be relatively difficult, and there is a big skill ceiling between some of the Resto Druids who are extremely comfortable cat weaving and some of the Resto Druids who are not. So there is a skill expression in terms of damage. In terms of Farseer Resto Shaman, I think it is a little bit easier to do damage. There is a lot of cheesing in terms of ancestor damage, and I'll talk about that later on in my Resto Shaman guides that I'll probably do in the future. But at the end of the day, the damage contribution between the top two healers that are considered to be meta in terms of Resto Shaman, in terms of Resto Druid, the difference isn't huge. And a lot of the times your damage contribution is also going to depend on how good of a group you are in, how many GCDs you can spare to take away from healing and funnel into DPS, because based on some of the most popular builds, none of these two healers are going to heal true damage, again, based on the talent builds. So the overall summary of these two healers when it comes to high-end mythical pushing, both of these healers provide top-tier HPS. Resto Druid is the king of pure HPS. If you look at meeting single target requirements, AoE healing requirements, the absolute king. But you also have to look at Resto Shaman contribution. It provides, or Shamans can provide Bloodlust. Your group might be lacking Bloodlust. Resto Shaman also provides Ancestral Vigor buff, which provides additional HP to the party, which cannot be discounted because it can be impactful. In terms of raid buffs, both of these healers provide insanely good raid buffs depending on what your group needs. Both of these healers have really good mana economies. You should not run into many mana issues depending on the content you're doing, how high of a key, depending on the pulse you're also trying to do. Both of these healers are extremely good right now because they have good healing, they have good utility, and they have really good raid buffs, which can right now fit into the comps really nice. My personal opinion, I think Resto Druid is quite intensive to play. It is more difficult to play in Mythic Plus content in my eyes if you want to min-max everything around this healer in terms of damage, in terms of healing, kitty weaving, applying hots, dots, bleeds, all of those things. I think it is very intensive, but the reward is there. The healing you can do once you get your tiers and all that is absolutely wild. If you're looking for a more chill healer in terms of some of these meta healers, Resto Shaman in my eyes is more chill. I think there is setup times as well. You still want to maintain things like Riptide and all those, but the burst stealing you get from Ancestral Swiftness, the power you get from your ancestors, your DPS rotation is a lot easier. I think Resto Shaman is more chill to play. So pick your poison because both of these healers are going to continue and complete some of the highest keys in the world. My kind of little prediction right now, if there's no changes happening to any of these specs, I do think the Resto Druid is going to continue and climb because the higher keys you're going to be doing, the harder the healing checks are going to be. So I do think the Resto Druid is going to climb in that highest keys in the world. But that does not mean Resto Shaman is not capable of doing that. We're talking about the highest keys in the world, and this impacts a minuscule percentage of players out there. Play whichever healer you enjoy the most, and these two healers right now fit the meta really nicely. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and I'll see you in my next guide.